Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Oakland Raiders at the Pittsburgh Steelers in their Week 9 matchup played November 8th, 2015. We're going to go over the scores and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis. So starting off in the first quarter, less than 3 minutes in, Derek Carr hit Michael Crabtree for a 22-yard touchdown. Sebastian Janikowski added the extra point, and it was 7-0 Oakland over Pittsburgh. Then with less than 5 minutes left still in the first, Chris Boswell hit a 34-yard field goal to put Pittsburgh's first points on the game as they cut the Raiders' lead to 4 with the score 7-3. So that did it for the first. Then in the second, about a minute in, DeAngelo Williams scored on a 3-yard touchdown run, and they went for 2. Roethlisberger then hit Williams for the 2-point conversion, and it was now 11-7 as the Steelers led by 4. Then with 6 minutes left before halftime, Derek Carr hit Amari Cooper for a 15-yard touchdown. Janikowski added the extra point, and the Raiders were back in the lead by 3 with the score 14-11. Then with less than 2 minutes left in the second quarter, DeAngelo Williams scores on another 3-yard touchdown run. Boswell adds the extra point, and the Steelers are up by 4 once again, now with the score 18-14. Then with less than half a minute left, Chris Boswell would kick a 38-yard field goal, and that would make it 21-14 headed into halftime as the Steelers led by 7. So now in the third quarter, a little after halfway, with 7 minutes still left in the quarter, Derek Carr hit Clive Walford for a 1-yard touchdown pass. Janikowski added the extra point, and this game was tied at 21 apiece. So that was the score after 3. Then in the fourth quarter, with 12 minutes still left in the game, Roethlisberger hit Martavius Bryant, and he made some amazing moves. You know, they talk about how fast guys are, but this must have been the slowest touchdown, as he just seemed to be in slow motion, just juking and jiving, making everybody miss him, as he was making some incredible moves that you really have to see to believe. And Boswell hit that extra point, and it was now 28-21 with the Steelers back in the lead. Now we would have a fumble on the kickoff, and so now the Steelers would take back over, and they would end up getting another touchdown less than a minute later as Roethlisberger hit Jesse James for a 4-yard touchdown. Boswell had the extra point, and it was now 35-21 as they turned the turnover into 7 points and now led by 14. But the Raiders bounced back, and now with 9.5 minutes left, they would score as Alawali scored on a 19-yard touchdown run. Janikowski hit the extra point, and it was back to a 7-point game with the score 35-28. So 7-point game, and now after the touchdown, and actually before that happened, Roethlisberger had left the game when he was sacked by Aldon Smith, so they would not have Roethlisberger going down the stretch. And then with a little more than a minute left, Derek Carr would hit Michael Crabtree for a 38-yard touchdown pass. And this was actually after he had thrown an interception on the possession before, but the Steelers didn't turn it into a score as they had done with the fumble earlier in the fourth quarter. But here off the interception, they didn't. And so when the Raiders got the ball back, they drove down the field, and that's when Derek Carr hit Crabtree for that 38-yard touchdown. Janikowski added the extra point, and this game was tied at 35 apiece with just over a minute left to play. So now just over a minute left to play, the Steelers are without Roethlisberger, but Landry Jones would drive him down the field. Antonio Brown made a huge play coming up clutch, as Antonio Brown does, as he made a play on 3rd and 2 from the 28 of Pittsburgh to bring it all the way to the Oakland 15, a 57-yard play. It almost looked like he was going to break that one for a touchdown, but he gets him into field goal range, and then with just seconds on the clock from the 1-yard line, they kicked an 18-yard field goal. Well, I could have swore it was 19 yards, but they kicked the field goal. Boswell, it was up, it was good. Actually had a couple penalties on that before he kicked the field goal, but it was now 38-35, and so then they would end up kicking it off, and the Raiders would try to get something going, but they ended up with a fumble. It was recovered by Williams, and this game came to a close, and the Pittsburgh Steelers win this one 38-35 in a wild shootout. They lost Roethlisberger, and it looks like he might be done for the season, though. But the Steelers are 5-4, 3-2 at home. The Raiders now are at 500, 4-4 on the season, and they're also 500 on the road at 2-2. So quite the crazy game. Is Derek Carr, I'll tell you, he's got the memory of a goldfish, and I mean that in a good way. Is that he makes mistakes, but he bounces right back. He had that interception, but he still came back to lead him to that touchdown to tie the game, but it wouldn't be enough. Even with just over a minute left, it looked like it was going to go to overtime. But Landry Jones, with a whole lot of help from Antonio Brown, as he is just an amazing player, and that's no surprise to anybody. Everybody knows he's one of the best, if not the best, at that position as a receiver. Brown is one of the best in the league, and he really came up huge on that play. So he was able to fake out Woodson, who is a Hall of Famer, and he ends up going 57 yards, setting him up for that field goal by Boswell there, which was basically a chip shot at the end. And a very high-scoring game, as we saw 73 points put up on the scoreboard between these two teams. And just in the fourth quarter, they combined for 31. So there was like a mad dash at the end of this game for who was going to win. Like I said, I'm sad to say though, Roethlisberger went down. They're already without Le'Veon Bell, although DeAngelo Williams came up huge in this game. He had a monster game. But let's look at these monster numbers for the Steelers. Start off with Roethlisberger. 24 for 44, 334 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception before leaving the game. Imagine if he'd been there the whole time. He would have had 400 yards. Landry Jones is 4 for 6 for 79 yards. And then on the ground, DeAngelo Williams replacing Le'Veon Bell. He had been doing pretty good the first couple games, and now he's back as the number one guy. And in this game, he comes up with 170 yards on the ground and 2 rushing touchdowns off of 27 carries. He also had 2 receptions for 55 yards in this game, which gave him 225 total yards for DeAngelo Williams. And Antonio Brown, he had 17 receptions for 284 receiving yards. Not to mention his 2 carries for 22 yards, which gave him a total of 306 yards for Antonio Brown in this game. It's just unheard of. And then Derek Carr for the Raiders, he was 24 for 44, 301 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. Latavius Murray, 17 carries for 96 yards. He also left the game due to injury as well. And Michael Crabtree, 7 receptions for 108 yards, 2 touchdowns. Amari Cooper, 7 receptions for 88 yards and a touchdown. And Seth Roberts, 3 receptions for 73 yards. Then we look at the kickers. Boswell, 3 for 4 on the field goals, 3 for 3 on the extra points. Janikowski, 5 for 5 on the extra points, did not attempt a field goal. Then we look at the defense. Yeah, the forced fumble by Shazier. And then Cockrell came up with the interception. And Mitchell also had a forced fumble for Pittsburgh. And for the Raiders, Emerson had an interception, and Aldon Smith had a sack. That was the sack that took Roethlisberger out of the game. Look at first downs, 27 for the Steelers, 24 for the Raiders. On third down, 6 for 17 for Pittsburgh, 35% converted. They went for it twice on fourth down, converting 1 for 50%. And for Oakland, 6 for 14, converting 42% on third down. Total net yards, 597 for Pittsburgh, 440 for Oakland. And net rushing yards, 195 for the Steelers, 139 for the Raiders. Net passing, 402 yards for Pittsburgh. They had the 1 sack allowed as Roethlisberger was sacked for a loss of 11 yards. And for the Raiders, 301 yards netted through the air. Carr was not sacked in this game. And really not many penalties, surprisingly, between a couple teams you would expect to see. I mean, the Raiders historically, but 5 penalties against Pittsburgh, 42 yards, 3 against Oakland, 21 yards. But a whole lot of fumbles for the Raiders. 5 fumbles for Oakland in this game. They lost 3 of them, and the Steelers fumbled once, and they lost that 1 fumble that they did have. And then in the red zone, 4 for 6 for Pittsburgh, 66%, 3 for 4 for Oakland, 75%. And the time of possession, 32 minutes and 4 seconds for the Steelers, 27 minutes and 56 seconds for the Raiders. This was a wild game, lots of points. And Pittsburgh, they looked to be in control of this one somewhat, but then the Raiders just kept coming back. I mean, especially in the fourth quarter, it entered as a tie game. It was pretty even through the first three, but then that crazy fourth quarter, Pittsburgh gets a couple of touchdowns. You think, all right, they're up by 14, this one's over. But then the Raiders come right back, and they end up bookending touchdowns in between an interception. And it was crazy, too, because there was 2 touchdowns for the Steelers early on in the fourth came within a minute of each other. That fumble on the kickoff, and then they score again, and it's like, oh, looks like the Steelers are going to run away with this one. But then Roethlisberger leads the game. Derek Carr just keeps going. They get the touchdown run by Alawali, and then Crabtree with that touchdown. When he's tied it up there with just over a minute left, I thought for sure they're going to overtime. But then Landry Jones gets that pass to Antonio Brown. What a play by Brown. I mean, just what a game by Brown. He was unbelievable. Not to mention DeAngelo Williams. And I'll tell you right now, I'm shooting myself in the foot for playing the Raiders defense in my fantasy. What was I thinking? I was thinking, hey, Charles Woodson leads the league in interceptions. And that was who that played, that 57-yard. I mean, you don't want to blame Woodson, necessarily. But it was just Antonio Brown found that hole. Landry Jones found the hole as well in that coverage. Looked like they were playing a zone there, actually. And because I don't know the way the position where Woodson was on that touchdown, and he just kind of looked like he slipped. And Brown just made an incredible move, and that's he kind of broke his ankles. But Antonio Brown, man, he is quite the player. What a play to set up that game-winning field goal by Boswell there at the end. And what a finish to a wild game and a wild fourth quarter. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day, had a great week, and are having a great weekend. And enjoy all the sports.